Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Carly and you're watching Sewscape, and today I'm going to take you through the sewing of this super cute mini skirt. In my last month of sewing, I sewed up this cute little crop top that is so light and summery, and I had a little bit left fabric. I'm trying to think, I think it was like 42 inches wide by maybe a meter and a half long. And then because it's a duvet cover, this is a thrifted duvet cover that I've sewn a couple garments out of, and I'm just like ready to get it out of my stash. I actually had the pillowcase that went along with the duvet cover too. So I cut that up and had to make the bias tape out of the duvet cover. So the skirt is from the June issue of Berta Style 2022. So I'm waiting on my May issue to arrive. So I'm so glad that I had something in a previous issue to tie me through until when it gets here. This was a great issue. I always feel like June is my favorite issue of every Berta Style. I've got it for, this will be my third year getting Berta Style. So both of the Junes in the past have been my favorite issues. So the skirt that we're making is this 104 skirt right here. So I was hoping to kind of make the longer version, but it just didn't work out with how much fabric I had. So I am going to be making the shorter version, which I think will be fine. It has these really lovely covered buttons all the way down the front, so I am waiting on those. My fabric store in town has closed down, so I had to order them from Amazon. So it says they're gonna arrive next Friday, but I have a feeling it'll probably arrive around maybe Wednesday or Thursday. Today is Monday, and yeah, so I've cut this out last night. I just got into the groove. It was my night off, turned on a good playlist, and it was a really fun cutting session. I was thinking I was gonna have to cut everything off grain, but it ended up everything was on grain. It was perfect, so it'll sit really nicely. The fabric is sheer, so I did cut out a lining, and the lining I actually like harvested from a curtain that I thrifted that I'm gonna make a jacket out of next year, I believe. So yeah, I'm using curtain lining as my skirt lining, and I think it'll be cute. It feels really nice and soft. I just don't know how breathable it'll be, but I think with the way the slit of the skirt is, it'll be totally fine. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start off by interfacing all my pieces that need to be interfaced, and then I'm going to make all the markings. There aren't that many markings on this pattern where the buttons attach. So I'm gonna make all my markings, do all my interfacing, and then I can get to sewing. Alright, so I've done all the marking and the interfacing. I actually didn't do all the marking. I didn't mark the placement on the little loops because I guess my toxic trait is waiting until last minute to do very important markings, but I'm just so excited to run my sewing machine. I know I'm gonna regret this, that I'll have to take a break and do the markings once I get to that point. Watch Karma be like, sew the loops first. Let's read in the magazine and see what is the first step. So if you're sewing along with me, it's on page 6 in the sewing supplement in the gray pages. So it says that the first step is to do the side seams. So we're gonna lay the front and backs together and stitch the side seams. You know what? I'm actually gonna not do that. I'm gonna stitch the pockets on first. I just like to sew my pockets a specific way, but yeah, I'm gonna do that now. So I'm gonna stitch the pockets to the side seams, and then I'm gonna sew the side seams together. So I'm just pinning these pockets on, and so as I'm pinning them, you might be freaking out being like, oh my gosh, the pocket placement, she has it wrong. But I just want the printed side of the pattern to be the inside of the pocket, so that if these pockets gape open, you see this side and not this side. It makes it a little bit less obvious. So I'm pinning this right side to this wrong side, and hopefully that makes sense to you. So if you were watching the last clip and you were cringing being like, the pockets are on the wrong way, guess what? The pockets are on the wrong way. And I didn't even notice until after I sewed them and top stitched them and overlocked them. So I'm just really actually hoping for a good fit around the hips so that the pocket doesn't pop out. I might, you know, top stitch it even a little bit just so it stays on the inside and I don't have to unpick all of that. Worst case scenario, I'll just sew the pocket shut, but I guess that's too bad. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So now I'm gonna sew up those side seams, sewing the two pieces together, fronts and backs, and going around that pocket. All right, so I've sewn one side on, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing before I do it. So when I sew a pocket like this, I like to sew one pocket piece onto each panel and then overlock the edges. And then the first thing I'll do is I'll sew around this pocket, and I'll just go right into kind of where the seam line will meet up on the other side. So for this, I did a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So I'm gonna sew into the skirt fabric itself by 1 centimeter. And then I'm gonna go over to the side seam and I'm gonna sew down the pocket. And I'm gonna sew about 1 inch below where this pocket starts here. And then back stitch. And then under here, I'm gonna sew about 1 inch up from where the pocket starts so that they're over, like catching where that seam goes across, and then sewing all the way down to the bottom. And what this does is when you are wearing a nice lovely summer dress or skirt and you have keys in your pocket, it makes the opening a little bit smaller so you can still put your hand in, but your like keys and stuff aren't going to fall out. Say if you're on the swing with your kids or, you know, bending over to pick something up from the sand. So yeah, it does make the pocket opening a little bit smaller, but it makes life a little bit easier in the summer. So when I look at that pocket from the right side, I don't think the fact that it's the wrong fabric is gonna bug me. I haven't pressed this yet, but I'm gonna give it a press and see how it looks, and I think that'll be totally fine. So I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. Hi everyone, so it's been a couple days since I filmed last. So the last thing that I did on this skirt is I sewed some long basting stitches along the upper edge of the skirt and of the lining piece after I sewed that all together. And then I pulled those basting threads until the width of that matched the same width of the waistband. and I evened out those gathers, making sure the center point of the skirt matched the center point of the waistband. And so I sewed that all together here. So because I'm not going to be finishing the skirt hem together with the lining, like they're not going to be sewn together, they're going to kind of be free from one another, I'm going to go ahead and cut the lining a little bit shorter and fold that under so that I can kind of base these two sides together and make them one, but it won't matter so much about the hem when it comes to that. So I'm going to do that, and then yeah, we'll see what the next. So here it is here. So I'll just show you on the underside here. So this is where we have attached the waistband. This lining kind of puckers a little bit, but that is fine. So I have hemmed this here. So I cut 2 inches off and then folded it up a 1/2 inch and then a 1/2 inch again. So it's 3 inches shorter than the hem itself. And so I'm just gonna base this on here. So these 2 layers now become one, and I'm not messing with the lining anymore. This is its own little entity here, and we'll just kind of continue sewing the skirt as usual now. So now that everything is done with the lining, we're going to take our tie band pieces, and look how uneven I cut these, but that is fine. I'm just gonna make sure my pieces are both the same, the interfacing. I think I just cut a little bit longer. I had to shorten the tie bands, I guess by, you know, 2.5 inches because of just fabric, the amount of fabric that I had. So I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to sew along one end, and then I'm gonna sew down the other side, the long end, and then we'll leave this side open, and we're gonna turn it inside or right side out. And then we can attach it to the skirt. So I just sewed up those edges. One of them, oh, the tie bands. One of them looks really good. And then the other one definitely has some kind of funky twistiness happening. When I cut these, I used the side seams of the duvet cover as the selvage edge, just to make sure everything was on grain. But that only works if they cut the duvet cover on grain, which, because I paid $2.99 for this duvet cover, they probably weren't necessarily making sure they were sewing on the grain line. So I guess we'll see what else in this project gets twisty. Hopefully not too much, but I think that's fine. You know, forever as I'm tying this into a bow, I'm gonna be like, why does this one side do this? It is because it is off grain. But that, I guess, is what we have to do. So next up, I think we're gonna be attaching the button bands, and I definitely didn't make the markings on those yet, so I'm gonna have to go through and put those markings on now. I just wanted to let you guys know I've had this loop turner here for 2 years, and I have not had this work one time, but when I used the bias cut piece of fabric and realized that it's supposed to be a pulling motion rather than a like pushing through motion, it worked amazing. And now I have these little button loops that are going to be so perfect. I have one strip that's quite a bit thinner than the other, but I think if I alternate them, no one's going to really notice how thick my button loops are. So I have all these loops pinned on here. I know it kind of gets lost in the fabric here, but I'm going to base this along just at the 1/4 inch seam mark, and I'm probably going to sew over all of these pins. If I break a needle, I'll let you know. And then I'm gonna kind of connect the wrong side of this piece, the unintersided interface side, and I'm gonna sew that at the regular seam allowance, which is 1 centimeter. So I tested out these loops to see kind of if my buttons would fit through them, and it looked like as long as I sewed this at a 1 centimeter seam allowance, they will fit. I have this habit of sewing my loops for buttons way too big, so I'm really hoping there's no gaping in this, but I guess we'll see. Just kidding, we're gonna work on the underlap. All these pieces actually look really similar, so as I'm going through my sewing room, I'm getting them all very confused. So the underlap is, there's only one of these pieces. We're gonna fold it right sides together and sew the two short ends. Flip it right side out and baste that long end. And I'll show you where we are going to put that.
Kids show. Talent show. And Mickey and Alice, they dressed up as Elvis and they had those little guitars.
Can you turn that on?
Let me go. Now.
So now that I have that underlap all sewn, I'm gonna take the left hand side here. I know they look almost the same, don't they? And I think I'm reading the instructions right. I've never done anything like this before. So this is going to be the seam allowance on this side, and I'm gonna attach this way. So this is the open end here, and it's gonna sit overlapping just by the seam allowance, that 1 centimeter. Hopefully this is how it's supposed to be done. And then when we go through and we attach the other piece to this piece will stick out like an extension. I'll keep you posted. I'll show you kind of as I'm going along how it's looking and if this is actually how to do it. Okay, so I switched it up last second. I did the seam allowances together because I feel like the underlap will flip out this way and the two waistband pieces will be in here. Honestly, if it's not right, you won't be able to like notice anyways. Famous last words. So now I think we attach the waistband pieces together and then we can attach them to this. All right, so now I'm going to take the uninterfaced side of the button band and I'm going to put it right sides together with the side that has the underlap and then also the one that has the buttons on it. And I'm going to sew along the top and the bottom and the side that has the underlap on it, and we're gonna catch that underlap and the kind of edges of the button band or button loops in those edges. So we're gonna sew those up and then turn it inside out and then we can attach it to the skirt. Hi everyone, it's the next morning. I go into work a little bit late today, so I'm gonna do a little bit of sewing before I go in. So I'll show you where I am at. So here is the skirt, and then we have our two button bands that are gonna be attached to the front. What I'm gonna do this morning is I have this pressed inward, and so I'm just gonna whip stitch this down. It took everything in my power to decide not to just stitch in the ditch, but I'm taking my time with this. I want it to be super cute. I am starting to worry that maybe it's not gonna fit. I've kind of held it up and it's looking a little bit tight right at my hip line, but I made the right size, so I hope it fits. It's hard to tell when they're the button band's at about 4 inches in the middle, so I'm sure it'll like probably like just fit right where the buttons go, but I don't want them to kind of be pulling apart. So yeah, so I'm gonna whip stitch this down, and then on these front edges here, the skirt kind of meets in the middle. On the front edge, right where that waistband is, we're gonna tack our ties. So we're gonna pop this just like this so that they come over. My tie is a bit bigger than my waistband is. I wonder why. Ah, it's fine. So I'm gonna tack this on before the button. So I just finished stitching that down. I'm exposing myself. My hand sewing isn't that good. I did notice as I was sewing the waistband has a bit of that like kind of twistiness happening too. So I'm gonna press it and hopefully that's okay. I kind of tried to counteract it as I was hand sewing just so that it would sit as flat as possible. But both edges here, kind of where the waistband meets the skirt, are exactly the same. So now I'm just gonna go over to my sewing machine and I'm gonna tack those ties. I'm gonna baste them onto this edge here before we attach the button plackets to the front. I'm also gonna overlock the bottom just because I'm gonna use my blind hem foot and we'll just kind of like sew that down. I'm only gonna do like a single fold, so I'm going to just overlock it so then it'll make it nice and easy. Alright, so I have those button bands sewed on. So I sewed through only one side, the interface side, and then on the inside here, I'm gonna fold that in 1 centimeter and I'm gonna whip stitch it down. But first we're gonna do the hem. So I noticed as I did mine, I was kind of really working with not that much fabric. So somehow one side ended up a 1/2 inch longer than the other side. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna serge the longer end so that it is exactly the same length as the button band. So on this side, if you can see, the button band is the same length as the hem here. So I'm just gonna kind of take that off because my button bands are exactly the same length. So it's easier to take some fabric off of one side rather than add it to the other side, which would be impossible. So I'm just gonna do that now, and then I'm going to kind of flip this facing outward and sew across here. And when I turn it right side out, the hem will be folded up like that. So I'm gonna press it. And then I'm gonna use my, not invisible hem foot, blind hem foot, and sew that down. I'm in a bit of a time crunch. I'm headed to work today, so I am gonna see if I can get that hem sewn before I go to work. And then the rest of this will have to be finished tonight when I get home. And that is my video for you guys today. So this skirt, I really like the pattern. I feel like the fabric that I used maybe was not totally suitable. Maybe a linen would be better, or maybe something that had a little bit more drape. I find the texture of the cotton, the weave of it, it just doesn't flow too well. And that could be because of the way that I cut it, assuming that when I was cutting the duvet, it was sewn on the grain, which I don't think it was. So I had some kind of funky stuff going on, but that's fine. I love this set. I love wearing them together. I think it is really, really cute. If I was to make it again, I would make it in a less busy fabric, because the covered buttons, it was a lot of work. And so I find it gets lost in the busyness of the pattern, but I wasn't that neat with the way I did my buttons. So maybe it's best that they aren't seen as much. So I still might go in and make an adjustment to this skirt. The back waistband, or the waistband in general, I feel like is maybe like an inch too big. And I find my waist fluctuates so much right now, just with the heat, with the seasons changing. I'm like retaining water, or even kind of throughout the month, like hormonally, how I hold on to water. So I find at this beginning in the morning when I put it on, it's a bit big, but then by the end of the day, it's perfect. So I'm thinking I'm gonna go in and just unpick the back top stitching on the, or whip stitching on the waistband, and attach an elastic kind of from one side seam across the back to the other side seam, and just kind of make that elastic 1 inch smaller than the waistband is, just so it has a little bit of that give in it, a little bit of forgiveness, and it will like snatch it in and make sure it's like sitting right at my waist, so that there's not too much stomach on show when I am wearing it with this little top. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I hope you guys have the most wonderful rest of your day. Happy spring sewing, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.